I started in the fishing industry in the late 90s. Um, and back then you could make money. It was a pretty booming industry. Groundfish was on the decline, but monkfish was on the rise, and was making decent money. I think my first month of work that year commercially, I made $30,000. I'm sorry, in 2 months. Shortly after that, everything changed. Prior to that, like a lot of other Rhode Island commercial guys, we fish in different fisheries. So I was in the for hire sector or charter sector, party charter boat, and did that part time, and then worked gill netting, and eventually that vessel was gill netting and trawling. Never got into the real big boat fishery, but the one we were in was big enough for me. I think back then everybody was allowed to work days at sea, so you could make a fairly decent living in federal waters, but if not, you could also balance it out with a state waters fishery. So state waters fishery was fluke, sea bass, scup, and monkfish for a while, gill netting for monkfish. And then, of course, started with the windmills, and we moved from there. The ocean use policy came into play. Catch shares came into play in 2010. Pretty much a lot of us were out of business. So then it was a state waters only fishery, and we moved on from there. It was kind of a struggle for a while. The fishery turned into a commodities market. So you could own the fish before you caught the fish. That ended up turning upside down, where those with quota could lease to those without quota. If you weren't in a catch share program, then you were put in the common pool, and you were pretty much given the scraps at the table. So I think, the sad part of that is when I got into the fishery, it was really good for a few years, and then we started to see the decline. So pretty much, state fisheries are pretty tough. You only fish within state waters, so that's what I switched off to. And I own 2 small vessels, and I fish inshore. Tough way to make a living, but balance it out between that, playing music, and whatever else that comes by. But the federal fishery all around the country has changed dramatically to the catch share program. And out in British Columbia, they call them slipper skippers. On the East Coast here, we call them armchair fishermen. And pretty much it's a bunch of people that own quota that have never stepped foot on a boat. They lease that quota for way too much money, which in turn makes the common man, paying for fish, he's paying 3 or 4 times more than he should be paying. So I guess that's where we are now, battling the battle of going from a fisherman to being a fisheries activist, and trying to put policies in place and change policies to keep the young guys in the fishery, or get young guys in the fishery, and actually keep the fishery in the hands of fishermen. I never thought I would go from being a fisherman to being a fisherman, fisheries advocate, activist, head pot washer. But that's where we are today, and it's pretty frustrating, pretty sad. But we're working on some changes, so we'll see what happens. And I guess I didn't mention that over the years, I've gotten my 100-ton captain's license. I own 2 small boats. I'm the board president of the North American Marine Alliance, and I'm also commercial rep on the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council. That's about it.